So today is January 19th, 2022, and we're here with Cam Burks. And I'm going to kind of pass it over to you if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are, where you work, and what your job is.
Yeah, hi, I'm Cam Burks. I am currently the Vice President for Global Safety and Security at Roku Incorporated, and I've been with Roku for about a month. Prior to Roku, I was with Adobe and also the Vice President of Global Safety and Security based in the San Francisco Bay Area in California. And was with Adobe for about 3 years, so through most of, all of COVID up until recently.
Wonderful. Well, that's interesting to hear that you have a recent job change, and we'd kind of love to hear about both of your jobs that have been kind of during the ongoing pandemic. But if we could talk now a little bit about what you were doing in December of 2019 when, the pandemic began, and how you were kind of initially involved in pandemic response, and also maybe a little bit about your educational background and, kind of what led you on this path to become involved in kind of COVID response.
Sure. Yeah. So, back to my education, I went to the University of Oregon for undergraduate and then on to the California State University at Sacramento for graduate school in criminal justice. I then joined the Foreign Service in the State Department and was a special agent with the Diplomatic Security Service and served as a regional security officer at various U.S. embassies around the world. And in that role, led various crisis management efforts in different parts of the world and for different crises. Some involving conventional sort of post 9/11 activities, and others in South Asia in particular. One of the first places I served, a few crises involving public health crisis. So I spent about 15 years in the Foreign Service and then transitioned out into a corporate global safety and security role at Chevron. And I was at Chevron for about 8 years, based at Chevron headquarters in the San Francisco area, and then transitioned to Adobe and joined Adobe in April 2019. And in December of 2019, I was still in the process of sort of developing a vision for the corporation's global security function. And one of my primary priorities at the time was to create a crisis management or an enterprise resilience program. So preparing for the eventuality of many crises that potentially could impact the company and our shareholders.
Gosh, well, yeah, that's definitely a very powerful background that you have. So interesting to hear about that. And kind of if you could now speak more specifically about your current role and maybe that role that you started in 2019, maybe giving us some details about how you were engaged in pandemic response.
Yeah. Absolutely. So my role at Adobe in December of 2019 was I did have responsibility for enterprise risk management and crisis management. And as the pandemic emerged, I was asked to lead our crisis response and then eventually our remediation efforts, and worked hard with my team to build a risk management model for the crisis. Associated really with keeping our workforce and our workplaces safe. And throughout 20 plus months or so, worked closely with our executive team at Adobe to employ this model, which I peer reviewed with many colleagues in the medical profession, the U.S. government, and other governments as well, where we're located outside of the United States. And worked hard through a variety of technology mechanisms and conventional crisis management, and was part of the leadership of the first crisis management team or crisis management committee at Adobe, and led some of those efforts, engaging regularly every day in the beginning in monitoring our global workforce and identifying ways that we could help our employees and their family members, not only in the United States, but all around the world, in particular in India, where our workforce unfortunately experienced quite tragic events throughout different cycles of the pandemic. And now at Roku, I'm doing the same thing. I am responsible for environmental health and safety, along with corporate global security and enterprise risk. And again, employing a variety of risk management methodology really across the board when it comes to managing a pandemic response.
Gosh, well, yeah, that's so interesting, and it would be great to hear more about kind of the different aspects of those employee protections or your mitigating these hardships that they may face in your pandemic response. So I don't know if that's focusing on ensuring that people are not in the workplace where COVID could spread, or employing different models about kind of looking at those risk strategies. Also, I don't know if you have any insight on like vaccinations and kind of looking at that aspect of the pandemic, especially with your companies. But
yeah, absolutely. So, in my view, crisis management, sort of crisis management 101, right? Very, very focused on people. And particularly in the beginning, ensuring that our workforce and extended family members of our workforce had confidence in the crisis management structure of the company and the leaders of the company that were responsible for engaging on COVID-19 and the virus. One of the main things we sort of adopted right in the beginning was just transparency in communications. And crisis communications, in my opinion, is the backbone of any crisis management exercise, whether it's a simulation or it's an actual crisis itself. And campaign awareness and virus awareness was something that we really picked up on in the very beginning. We employed throughout the 20 months. Each month or so, I would welcome a guest on to do a quick fireside chat or a podcast, whether it was with Dr. Katz from Georgetown, or Dr. Fauci joined us 1 month, and other folks that could speak to the science behind the virus and really help to inform our workforce. At the same time, we were very, very transparent in articulating the risk model that we had adopted to open offices, close offices, enable business to take place, customer meetings, client meetings, leadership team meetings, critical business that we knew we had to somehow figure out a way to continue to remain a viable, competitive company for our shareholders. And, I'm proud to say the team came together, cross-functional team came together globally, and really did a good job, I think, in ensuring that the core values of Adobe as a company and sort of creativity for all, and, ensuring that creativity for all was still accessible around the world during this pandemic, existed and was consistent. And we did so, I think, in a way where we really kept our folks safe. Personally, it was a tragic time for me, emotionally for me, and care very much about, and still do, our employees at Adobe and certainly at Roku. I would hold sort of open office hours, on Fridays, where I would just keep an open line to anybody who wanted to call in the company. 30,000, 25,000 people could call, and we could just talk. When vaccines came on the scene, from a policy perspective, we, as an executive team at Adobe, absolutely endorsed and strongly encouraged all of our employees to become fully vaccinated, and but did have a dialogue and ensure that our employees had outlets to ask questions about vaccines. And we made sure that we had the right medical professionals, public health experts, physicians, epidemiologists, virologists, everybody to bring to bear to ensure that our workforce really had all the tools in the toolbox.
amazing. Yeah. And so you were kind of touching upon the fact that communication is a huge aspect of your job in terms of, mitigating these risks. And you also mentioned that, you were dealing with global employees. And were there any kind of difficulties or challenges you ran into in terms of pandemic communication in this global aspect?
No, we had a fantastic, global cross-functional communications team and communication strategy. It was a crisis comms sort of strategy brought to bear, and really did actually come down to the individual. And some argued that individual sort of engagement on it from a crisis comm standpoint not scalable for a large company, but it absolutely is paramount, I believe. And taking individual calls, responding to individual emails, speaking to small offices, hosting roundtables, forums, or family members. Those are all keys to success. The challenges that we encountered really were more on the sort of the clinical side, and when it came to vaccine distribution, primarily outside the United States, and in some places where we operated, very difficult for our employees to have access to vaccines. So in places where we could, by law, provide vaccine to our employees, we did. And then I would say the other challenge was just around vaccine hesitancy, primarily in the United States, where our largest workforce, and that was, again, we addressed through as much education as we could.
Yeah, interesting to hear about that, and it's positive to hear that you found the successful global communication aspect. So that's great. And kind of now looking at your job at Roku, what do the next 6 months look like for you, especially kind of given that we're in a large wave of the pandemic at the moment?
Yeah, I think we've by trial and error over the last 23 months, we're fortunate to, I guess, always looking at the upside and that's the way I look at things when it comes to risk and crises. We've trial and errored a lot over the last 23 months when it comes to crisis management. We're in a situation now that's dire. That's a phase of this virus that is catastrophic and is troubling. But we've got some really good tools in our sort of toolbox when it comes to crisis management, communications, and philosophy, really around how we're going to at the end of the day live with some artifact if it indeed transitions out of the current state of COVID. And I think I'm optimistic. I think over the next 6 months, I think in general, business in general will return to some semblance of pre-COVID, but never likely fully pre-COVID, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course. And just kind of lastly, building on that question, are there any larger lessons that you would like to share with us that kind of you have learned during your work and during this time of the pandemic that you will kind of like to share about moving forward and how you'll think about things?
Well, preparedness from a crisis management standpoint and investment in resources and energy is paramount. The creation of pandemic response plans or infectious disease, response plans, every category of crises that an organization, whether it be government or a company, should sort of prepare for. It's absolutely critical that plans are developed and then practiced, and that there is some sort of awareness of what to do when we see something that we've never expected before emerge. The other piece, we've learned over the last 23 months that direct engagement communications, like I said, and kindness and compassion is absolutely critical, and sincere compassion, to the workforce and to our colleagues and employees. And we've shared a time over the last 23 months that has been incredibly close and personal. I have with my colleagues, with the family members of my colleagues, unlike any time that I will likely have in my professional career. So if we look back and sort of grab a practice that we can then apply forward is compassion. There's no doubt about it, and that has to be really baked into conventional crisis management, and all the certifications that you can hope to sort of during a crisis management sort of program build. There's a human element, and it's really, really important.